I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we've got a very exciting new product to take an in-depth walk around with. It's the new Volkswagen T-Cross, a small SUV that will be arriving in the Australian market in about a year's time from now, but it actually hasn't even launched globally yet. We've got a German spec car here, we are in Sydney, and we're able to take a look at an indication of what our spec of T-Cross might look like when this car arrives sometime after Christmas. The T-Cross is essentially an SUV based on the same iteration of the MQB platform as the Polo small car. That's just a smaller version of the standard MQB platform. It will join the new T-Roc SUV, which you can also find content on our channel when it arrives in Australia. And on that thought, if you haven't subscribed to Chasing Cars, make sure you do so below this video and hit the notification bell so you never miss one of our in-depth Australian car reviews. But back to the T-Cross. It is a little bigger than the Polo, but not by that much. It's smaller than the T-Roc, but also not by that much. But what's really interesting about this SUV is it actually looks pretty different to other vehicles that Volkswagen makes. And for a relatively cookie cutter company design wise, it's kind of cool to see some personality coming out in this T-Cross. So at the front end, it carries the same sort of cascading look as the Touareg SUV, but with a little bit more funk to it. These really cool squircle surrounds for the running lights down there, a really aggressive bonnet shaping, but it's around the back where this thing doesn't really look like any other Volkswagen in the range, which we'll check out shortly. This thing is shaping up to be one of the more practical offerings in the small SUV class. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to jump inside, take a look in the front, what's the technology like, how comfortable is the T-Cross and how practical. We'll see how much space there is in the back for adults and kids, and then we'll have a look in the boot of this small SUV to see whether or not it'll take this segment by storm in terms of how practical a vehicle of this size and shape can be. Nope, the world has not changed sides. This is a German spec car, which means the steering wheel is on the left. Australian delivered cars will have it in the right spot over here. But this does give us a good initial indication of the layout and the design of the T-Cross's interior. So it is sort of the latest iteration of Volkswagen interior design. We haven't really seen anything that looks exactly like this inside before. So it's based around the same two-screen concept as high-spec Polos. So there's an active info display in front of us and the 8-inch touchscreen over here. That's likely to be the high-end infotainment in the T-Cross like it is in the Polo. But we now have this really cascading center stack with these sort of kind of flat-fronted buttons. That's a new design element. Air vents shifted below the screen, and this sort of secondary rubberized holder up here, which I actually think is a really good place to put stuff. There will be wireless charging offered down here ahead of the shifter, 2 fast charging USB ports. Whether or not this thing makes it to Australia is not yet known. Hopefully the T-Cross is available with a manual, but sadly we don't believe it will. As for the cabin finishes, apart from the supple leather on the wheel and the shifter, it's all fairly utilitarian. Harder plastics up here on the dash, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Australian cars arriving with a slightly higher standard of interior finish. That's also the plan for the T-Roc. You know, for example, this strip in a Polo, this is soft. Here in the T-Cross, it's hard. So maybe when this car comes to Australia, that will have been altered. Now, the seats, they're pretty comfortable and supportive. These fabric ones are a European special. Whether or not this particular seat makes it to Australia, we'll have to wait and see, but it's got lumbar and manual adjustment, and it feels pretty good. You may have already noticed this new steering wheel if you're a real train spotter. This is a fresh design for Volkswagen, and I think it's pretty clean. Same nice supple leather finish on the wheel and the shifter that we're used to from this brand. So all in all, a nice, clean, tidy cabin, and one that should look pretty good when it arrives to the Australian market. One really good thing about the T-Cross is that even though it's very much city-sized, backseat space is good. So for me, I've got a couple of extra inches of headroom. I've got good legroom and good toe room sitting behind my own driving position. So carrying 2 adults in the back is very possible, maybe even 3 kids because the floor is pretty low. As for amenities back here, we've got 2 fast charging USB ports, bringing the car's total to 4. That's really good for a new car that will be launching in 2020. So that kind of technology forward approach is good to see. No flip down armrest in this car. could come on the Australian spec, no air vents either. We'll see whether or not that remains the case. But one good thing is that the ISOFIX points, they don't even have any caps on them, so you can't lose a cap. That's good thinking. Child seats will just slide straight on in. And as for comfort back here, I can't really complain because the backrest is angled. The bench also slides, which means that you can minimize legroom, perhaps if you're carrying very short-legged people, or just using this as a parcel shelf and have plenty of boot space, or you can put the seat back, have a good amount of room as I've already displayed, and still have almost 400 litres back there, so that's a bonus. So it's here around the back of the T-Cross that we can see these funkier design elements that I was referring to up front, like this full width reflector bar here. It's black, but it has the red reflector running right through it, either side of the badge. So when it's parked up at night and you drive up behind one of these things, it's going to look really distinctive. I think that's pretty cool. It's really squared off, really short overhang there. So this thing has really exploited the amount of space available. And because of that, Volkswagen have been able to get the boot space up to being the biggest in this class. That rear row slides, as we saw when we were sitting in the back. If you've got it at its rearmost position, you have 385 litres of space. If it's pushed forward, that expands to 445 litres, which is literally about double what the smallest vehicles in this segment offer. So it is shaping up to be very practical. It's got the same sort of special features in the boot that Volkswagens make us used to, like places to hang your shopping. Not stuff like remote releases for folding the back seats, but when it's this short, it isn't that hard to come around to the back door. It's also that the electric tailgate, that's reserved for the bigger T-Roc, but as I've just demonstrated, it's pretty low and pretty easy to shut. No journalist has officially driven the production version of the T-Cross yet. This car only launches in Europe in a couple of months, and the Australian launch will be remarkably quick by Volkswagen standards, scheduled to occur around January 2020. What we do know is that the Australian spec T-Cross will have a very similar mechanical offer to the Polo. The 85 TSI engine, as it's known, will likely be the standard offer, producing 85 kilowatts of power and 200 newton meters of torque. That's 115 horsepower and 148 foot-pounds of torque. This turbocharged 1-litre 3-cylinder petrol will drive the front wheels alone, with 4-motion all-wheel drive likely off the table. That means that the Polo's entry-level engine, the 70 kilowatt or 94 horsepower tune of the 1-litre triple, will not come to Australia in T-Cross form, nor will diesel. We are hopeful though that Volkswagen Australia will at some point offer the larger 1.5-litre 110 kilowatt or 148 horsepower TSI Evo 4-cylinder in the T-Cross, which is being mooted for Europe. But sadly, Australian petrol quality is currently so poor that the TSI Evo engine cannot even be offered here. Hypothetically speaking, there is also a chance of the T-Cross being extended into GTI form, perhaps using the same 147 kilowatt or 197 horsepower EA888 engine as the Polo GTI. We'll see. Let me know with the poll up in the top right hand corner if you'd like to see a T-Cross GTI. While the car I got to play with had the common for Europe 6-speed manual gearbox, it wouldn't hold out much hope for this in Australia. The SUV market is overwhelmingly based around automatic gearboxes, sadly, and while the 6-speed stick shift in the Polo 85 TSI is a sweet thing, we expect a 7-speed dual-clutch auto to be the sole offer here. That said, we would be happy to be surprised. The suspension setup is likely to carry over from the Polo, with slightly more durable components to deal with the T-Cross's expected 100 kilograms of additional mass over the Polo. That will mean McPherson strut front suspension and a torsion bar at the rear. So those are my first impressions in a static sense of the new Volkswagen T-Cross, an SUV that we're excited to drive hopefully later in 2019 ahead of its arrival onto the Australian market in early 2020. Volkswagen have obviously been pretty late into the little SUV game, but when they arrive, at that point in time, they're going to arrive in a big way, not just with the Polo-sized T-Cross, but also with the Golf-sized T-Roc. And what VW are hoping for is to really smash into the market, take it by storm with two products that we reckon are shaping up to be pretty good. Now, if you haven't subscribed, do so already by clicking the button below this video so you never miss one of our in-depth Australian car reviews. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think about the T-Cross, or just about how you think our content is coming along, and any special requests. And as always, thanks a lot for watching Chasing Cars.